What's up? How's it going?
Good.
Thank you for giving your time today. Firstly,
Thank you for having me.
One of the things that I love about this podcast is I genuinely get to sit down with people who I've known for a longer time, but never had a proper long conversation with. Right?
That's true.
One
Yeah.
of them being you. We've known each other for a year and a half now, but never really sat down. Maybe got and drink sometimes and
Yeah.
just like had
Yeah.
a dinner, but that was
Yeah.
always in a group.
Or,
Never
or
really.
pass by the gym.
Yeah, that is more unlikely. No one's going to believe you when
That's
you say
true.
that.
Yeah.
But I've never really sat down to know the years of experience that you have and know about everything that you've been up to. So before I can move forward and like just go into deep conversation about what I want to know about what you're currently up to, let's get digging from the bottom and figure out where you come from. I know you were the ex VP of content at OML before getting into FamPay.
Yeah.
I want to know everything that you did there.
Awesome. Cool. So actually, I've had what most people call an unconventional journey to where I am right now, right? But I don't look at it like that, and I'll tell you why in due time. But I actually started. So background all the way back from school. I was a very good student, right? And even back then, I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do. I was like 15. Though I did know I was very creatively inclined. Right, ever since I was a kid, I always knew I was very creatively inclined, but never really got to explore it in school and things like that. And then I ended up taking science in 11th, 12th in Bombay. And about, halfway through, about 11th getting over and stuff like that, and while I'm studying for all of these like entrance exams, I kind of realized, man, this is probably not what I really want to do. But I don't know what exactly it is that I should do, and that's when I started like exploring, what are the avenues within the creative field, and then I started learning about. I started watching a lot of films, and I started following a lot of filmmakers. Trying to understand different forms of art and creativity, and then I learned about advertising. Oh, that's a thing. Where you also get to work with brands and still create fun content and things like that, right?
Channel
And
V,
all of that.
MTV.
I used to watch these MTV promos, and I used to be damn fascinated. I was like, dude, it's so cool. Like they're creating such cool content. Really intrigued me, right? And you're right, there was no real big YouTube or social media and things like that, and very conventional advertising, to be honest. And I had this habit. Okay, I had this habit where I was this oddball who would wait for the ads to come on TV. Right, because I would be like, यार content ही यार at 30 seconds में this guy selling me a story, selling me a product, or they're telling me like something about the brand or whatever, and that really intrigued me. And I used to like really, I still remember, and I still do this often. I have a book, usually I have a notebook, and I put in my thoughts every now and then. And I used to see ads, and I used to start breaking them down. What I like about, what I don't like, what I would do differently. So I had this thing going on, when I was like 15, 17 years old. So anyway, my parents were super supportive, and they said, okay, what do you want to do? So I said, I want to do Bachelor's of Mass Media, and I got admission in a college. I had decent grades in 12th. And honestly, it's the worst course that ever exists, right? BMM, it's terrible. But obviously, I realized that very quickly when I joined it, that hey, this is like, I know more than what they're teaching me already. This is not going to help me a lot, and it's very dated. Was a dated course. I don't know how it is anymore, but I'm guessing it's not very different. So I started tinkering with like, okay, what do I do with my time? Because I would literally spend like 1 hour a day studying, and I would be like, okay, this is it. Like, I don't know what, like what else do I do? So very quickly, in the first semester or something, I started like tinkering with the idea of interning with a director or a production house or doing my own thing. And then initially obviously I was very young. I didn't get a gig in my first semester. So I made a short film. Okay, with whatever limited knowledge I had, speaking to people, etc., etc. I've been on some shoots before that. And then I realized, okay, you know what? The film was great, was nice with whatever limited resources I had, but I said I need to get educated in this. I can't go around just doing my own thing, because there's so many technical things that were wrong in that film, and I look at it now, which is why it's not pinned anywhere. But as an effort, it was good. The story was there, the characters were great, and I'd figured out all of that. But I realized I need to assist someone who knows what they're doing, right? Because they're not teaching me this in college. I'm not doing a filmmaking course. They're teaching me about advertising and psychology and stuff like that, which is cool, but it's not helping me in the cause. And so I
And
figured
I
something
think
out.
this whole process of being on ground and grinding it out
Oh,
back
yeah.
then meant a lot
Even
in terms of
now.
exposure.
Absolutely.
Because right now I think we have the internet, which is like very accessible,
Yeah.
and because of that information is so easy to find out, right? Back then you had to go through the real grind
Absolutely.
on ground physically,
I,
reach
I
out to
think it's still
people.
underrated today, if you
Yeah.
ask me. You know, a lot of people think they can learn things off the internet. Yes, you can, and please go ahead and do it. But unless you don't go and get your hands dirty, that learning is not learning. Learning is on.
But it's crazy. Like again, assuming back then there were lesser people like you who'd really want to do this, push them and go on ground. Now because of the information that's available, everybody wants to do that. So
Yeah.
it's like we've shifted access from having access to someone or in person, which was available back then, and not having internet access, to now there's an abundant access to
Oh, yeah.
internet. But if I have to reach to someone personally, it's just so hard,
Yeah.
even though they're present across,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But my heart was still with filmmaking. So you know, after I graduated from college, immediately I joined a director called Abbas Tyrewala. He had made a film called Jaane Tu Ya Jaane Na right before that, very popular film, and I was his DA. I was his director's assistant. Now that's the closest you can be at working with a director, where you are literally involved with all the processes. So I ended up like working with a lot of agencies, and of course sometimes a lot with the, you know, directly with the clients as well. You know, with the marketing heads or sometimes the CEOs of these large corporations and companies would come and sit, and these big brands would come and sit in meetings, and I would present. I was really young, you know, I was like 19 or something, 19, 20. Yeah, I think I left that when I was about 21. And then there was a fun part of my life that not a lot of people know about, but I decided to do a business. You know, when I was 21, 22 years old with two of my school friends, and we set up an organic farm in Gujarat.
Oh.
Yes. And we ran that for a year, and it was a failed venture, right?
How do you get into organic
yeah,
farming from
yeah. So I'll
advertising?
tell you what happened, right? Like I think being in that, being with the content, like with the production, I was just very taxing at that age, you know. And I really, now when I look back in retrospect, you know, I can connect the dots and I can tell what happened. But back then I was very disillusioned. I was like, man, this it's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, having
Right.
heard so much of it already, I
Yeah.
know now that you have a very strong background in the art and creativity part of things, right?
Yeah, but also in like working with brands, right? So that was also something that I also figured out while I was doing that. And so it all got to me to a point where I was like, abhi yaar ho gaya. You know,
Story of every creative's life.
yeah, it was one of those moments in my life, and you know, a friend of mine and a couple of two friends of mine, they were looking at starting a business. They didn't know what they want to start. One of them has a background in agricultural sciences from BITS, and you know, he said, you know, I'm looking at doing this. I'm like, man, this sounds great. And of course I was naive, you know, I was 21. Of course I knew what I was doing, but we got into it. We actually were pretty successful for the first 6 months, but then we were in Gujarat, and there were factors outside of our control that we couldn't take care of, like water and things like that. And it was a really bad monsoon, and it was actually a big operation. It was 13 acres, 10 greenhouses, and we were farming, like proper
Wow.
industrial scale farming. And that, even though it was, we didn't lose a lot of money, so it's fine. But and in that year and a half ish of that we ran it, I also did freelance gigs. So I realized that, hey, you know, freelancing is a thing. You know, when you go out and you tell people, hey, I have these skills, I can. So I started directing small AFPs, you know, small commercials. Did some work with MTV back in the day. I did an AFP for them.
Back when MTV and Channel V were the coolest things out
MD
there.
it was still cool then, right? It
Yeah.
was like 2-3 years into roadies, and it was still a thing. So I really enjoyed that as well. And I was freelancing while this business was on. But obviously the business was not extremely successful, but it taught me so much. In terms of like entrepreneurship, right? And it's a supremely underrated thing that people feel like you should not fail. I feel like if you don't fail, you don't learn, right? And the harder you fail, right, the more you learn, right? The harder you fall, the urge to pick up is always is larger, right? So it was very similar for me personally when we came out of it. You know, one part of me was like, damn, I failed. like we couldn't lift this business off, and we didn't see it through, and blah blah blah. But the other part
Was
of it
it
was like,
emotionally draining when the final day when you've wrapped the whole venture up?
oh man, that's a
How
very
do you
hard
feel?
day. It's a very hard day. And the thing is, you're dealing, very honestly, if I can, speak hours on that experience, but I'll tell you in a couple of minutes. But it was like we were dealing with farmers, and they depend on you for their daily wage. And when you shut shop and you move on, they're stuck. Of course, they'll find jobs outside. It's not like, but you feel bad, we really felt bad, but they were super supportive, we were super supportive to them. Anyway, so all of that happened, and that's when I said, okay, you know what, I really need to focus on my core competencies. I know what I'm good at. Clearly not farming. Am I good at running a business? I wasn't the best, but when I came out of that, I knew a lot more, coming out of it than I did before. And just generally supremely underrated skills like negotiation. Like we've taken tons of our produce and gone to Reliance Mart to sell it. Because if you don't sell it that day, it goes bad.
Of course.
Right? And then what do you then waste it? So, you need to find the right price, find the right time, and all of this taught a lot. And I learned a lot from that experience. But when I came back is when I was looking for my next role, and I figured that, okay, you know what, I've played around a lot. Now I really need to get serious and do something where I know I'm good at. So I did apply to some places, I knew some people, and I was getting offers with some agencies and some production houses, but it was not really exciting for me at that time. So I was also still freelancing while I was doing that, and that's when I chanced upon working with AIB, right? I was a second unit director on one of their sketches back in 2015, in the latter half of 2015, and I did a couple of these sketches with them as a freelancer. And then OML happened, and I knew Tanmay, I knew a couple of people at AIB, and Naveed, and all of these guys were, still there.
That's around the time when I had just started my career
Yeah.
as an intern at the company I used to work with, and I remember very clearly that AIB was one of the hottest topics in
Yeah.
terms of entertainment.
Yeah.
They had some of the greatest IPs, content IPs out there.
Yeah.
They were doing a bunch of things, and OML at some later stage had a role to play a lot.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we had a bunch of friends at OML also who would like invite us for these gigs. I think roast was one of the
Yeah.
first things that happened.
Yeah, it was. The first big things that blew up. And when I knew
Blew up and how?
Yeah, when I knew them, right, they were not as big as when they were later. It was like late 2015, early 2016. Yeah, so this was right in the beginning and AIB used to work out of a bungalow in Warsaw, in 7 bungalows, from what I remember. They used to live there, have their office there and stuff like that. And that was about the time when they started working with OML and OML started representing them, and that's when I joined OML, right? And that's when my sort of journey with understanding the business of content really began. I did understand it in terms of like advertising agencies, brands, and production houses, but it was very
Like I said, the
linear.
creative side of things.
Yeah, and now I started understanding the business side of things, right? Now, so suddenly I realized that, there's a lot of money that can be made. There's a whole ecosystem that exists around content. There are multiple ways of monetizing it, and that's when YouTube was blowing up in India as well, right? So it was really interesting time to be at OML because it was also blowing up as an agency.
Again, this was like around 2015,
16.
2016,
Yeah, 16, yeah.
Having a function in a company that understands the business of content around that time would have been such a big boon, because I realize now that how even in today's time, right? Again, there being so many avenues for disseminating content, people don't still know the maximum capacity that content can be monetized up to.
Oh, absolutely.
So entering this space in 2016 must have been such a boon for your career. Like, I want to fully break it down and again go through exact experiences you might have had with OML. In terms of, let's say, some brand projects you must have worked on, some content IPs you worked on, and how the path to monetization or the path to uplifting creators. Because I remember there were just so many things happening. No one could really clearly define what OML did. And again, being a part of such a larger organization, like, obviously there's value in terms of your credential, but I'm sure as a function also you must have had completely different experiences that people don't really know about, especially being the brand side of things, right? that is not something that's heavily advertised as an organization.
Absolutely. Cool. So I joined OML in 2016. It was a good time to be there, right? A lot of YouTube creators were blowing up. And back then, I think you mentioned this, right? OML was one of those companies where no one really knew what they were doing, but they were doing a lot, right? So it's a double-edged sword where, you can, it's a double-edged sword because it's this cool company doing a lot of things and it has like this persona, right? Like that, hey, they're doing so many cool things. And it's a weekender, there's AIB, there's this, there's that. But no one really knew exactly karta kya hai, OML, right? So it was a good thing to be there because I got exposed to a lot of different things that were happening, and I happened to be there at the right time also. And also, after all of this that I had done, I had this extreme urge of creating big things in the business of content. Like I was like, this is the place, this is where it's going to come from. I have to make an impact here, right? I have no option in life. I have no plan B. This is where I'm going to, do something big. And my first role at OML was working with Ajay Nair, who was then the CEO, and he's still the managing director there. And it was very simple. So, we used to manage a few creators, not a lot back then, it was a handful. And we had created a bunch of IPs, right? Long form content IPs. And it was my job to go with Ajay to OTT platforms or television channels. Back then, OTTs were just launching. Like Netflix had just
The
launched.
term OTT might have not
Yeah,
have
it
been
had just
like,
about sort of become a thing in India, and Amazon had launched. And, we would go around looking at, going to these people who were looking at acquiring content or producing content and say, hey, look, we have, all of this content, and what are you guys looking at in your slate? How does your programming look like? We'll help you with that, etc., etc. So it was a lot of sort of shopping around to understand what can we sell to whom. And we spoke to everyone from Netflix, Discovery, networks, Amazon, Z, Sony, Hotstar, and a bunch of these. There was a show that was about a couple of years old, just Son of a Beach, that we ended up selling to Hotstar at one point. And then there was On Air with AIB. That was a show that went on Hotstar again.
so process that you guys followed during that time was having self-produced everything and
Yeah.
then selling as an IP, or is it like a pilot that
No,
you're
we would always sell a pilot. Like we would always sell like the concept first, right?
Okay.
And obviously it would depend from platform to platform, and they would have different ways of looking at it. But then something cool happened, right? That really made me feel like I can make an impact, and I did. Was we went to Amazon and they were looking at, it was Ajay, me, and another person from our company, and they were we're presenting a bunch of things to Prime Video, and hey, we have this, we have that, we have this, and then they said, look, you guys manage these stand-up comedians and stuff, and we're looking at something non-fiction in the comedy space. Can you help us come up with something? And Ajay's like, yeah, like we come back in a week with something. And honestly, we had no clue, what we're talking about. Like I was in the meeting, I was like, well, we don't have anything. And on the drive back, he said, let's figure this out. Like talk to whoever you have to talk to, look at some of these older formats, blah blah blah. So I took the week, and I spoke to a bunch of I spoke to Abish, I remember, I spoke to Tanmay, I spoke to a couple of these people to put together a format for a non-fiction show to take to Prime Video. That show came to be known as Comicstan.
okay.
Right? And that show kind of blew up. And I was involved in really putting that show together. And that process was really eye-opening for me, where I kind of learned so much about the business of it, about understanding how content is obviously produced at that scale, but also distributed at that scale. Amazon, were great. They put in a lot of effort into marketing the first season, and I also learned so much about that. So that was great. So my first 6 months, Comic Con happened, and a bunch of other shows also we sold as well, but none as popular as Comic Con. But OML was still a growing company back then, right? And Ajay, and one of our clients back then was it still is at OML, the Bacardi group, right? OML produces or used to produce NS7 Weekender, the music festival that was sponsored by Bacardi. And so Bacardi came to us with a problem statement, saying that, and OML used to produce some IP, so that one was called the Duelist,
Yeah.
really nice show, Bring on the Night, couple of other things, but nothing that was extremely great for their business. It was great for awards, it was great shows, all of that, right? So they came and said, look, we're in a place where we're not really growing in terms of our marketing. Can you help us figure this out? And so we did a little bit of an RCA, like a root cause analysis, to understand what is the problem with their marketing strategy and how do we work with content to sort of better it. And then we went to them with a plan of working with creators. Now, why this was interesting is because Bacardi is an alcohol, right? And alcohol is a taboo subject for marketing and advertising in most countries. You can't go ahead and say, hey, buy this rum. You can't go ahead and say, buy this vodka. It has to always either be through a surrogate or through other means and ways. And so we said, you know what, you guys need to work with creators because they can say whatever they want. And some of these creators have a massive reach. So
yeah, in terms of television broadcasting and that segment of the media,
none of that.
it was
Like the
taboo.
mainstream media, there was
Internet,
nothing.
I think, like
And this was about like 2017,
Yeah.
and Instagram was blowing up, YouTube was blowing up, Facebook was obviously big at that point, and so we were like, okay, you know what, we need to leverage all of these platforms, we need to work with these content creators and influencers and embed your brand in pop culture. Like, how do we make the brand cool again? And so they said, okay, you know what, great, let's do something with this, and we won this mandate for India, Thailand, and South Africa at that point for one brand, which was Bacardi. So we're like, okay, what do we do? And we thought, let's create this content IP, but really let's go out to the masses with it, right? Let it not be just for awards. Let it actually make some impact. And what is the impact that we want to make? And the obvious thing was music, because Bacardi is entrenched in music. When you think about, Bacardi, at least when millennials do, they always associate it with music cassettes and CDs, and it was really popular. Okay, so the association with Bacardi was strong, but it was, and there was obviously NH7 weekend or the music festival. So we're like, okay, how do we make this into a thriving property? And we made something known as the Bacardi House Party Sessions. It was a project that I was spearheading, which was essentially, independent musicians in the country didn't have a platform to showcase themselves, right? They would either make the music and put it up on SoundCloud or Apple Music, but there was no real revenue stream for them. The only money they would make is if one song blew up, for whatever reason, they would start touring and make money. That's a very, very low chance. And there was very few musicians who were breaking through at that point. There was Nuclear, maybe Pratik Kuwad had just about broken out, but Ankur Tiwari, all of these guys, but it was not big. So we said, how do we get this brand to actually support these people? How do we, sort of not cut out the record labels, but how do we like make it more independent and easier for these guys? So that's what Bacardi House Party Sessions was all about. And we said, okay, we have this great IP, we have this great idea, but how do we distribute this, right, on the internet, right? So that's when AIB stepped in, and they said, we'll make music videos on our channel. Oh, we're like, oh, that's great. And across YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, they had over a 10 million reach, and that's massive for that time. And even today, it's quite a big number. So we said, great, so then we started creating promos, and we put this content out, distributed it through AIB, and we got a ton of entries, like thousands of entries of musicians. And we selected a musician called Ritviz.
Yeah.
Right. And
Ritviz was, I think, one of the first.
He was the first one. It was the first product of Bacardi House Party Sessions, and he made a song called Ud Gaye. Right, and I think the rest is history, right? That song was, it kind of blew up.
That's all you have to mention.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So that song blew up, and I still take pride in saying when you go to that song, the first name in the credits is mine.
Wow.
Yeah. So no, but I mean, of course, there's a huge team involved, and credit where it's due. But it was a great, thing that happened, and we kind of, I realized that, man, achieving pop culture and brands is actually doable. It's and the internet and creators help you make this happen, and it's a win-win for everyone. Bacardi got the status they were looking at being this enabler of pop culture. Ritviz became Ritviz. AIB became this brand just beyond comedy, right? Like they started doing cool music, and OML was obviously a part of all of this, and so I kind of realized that, wow, this is, there is so much more that can be done, and we replicated this success in Thailand and South Africa. Right, and not a lot of people know this because you don't speak Thai or Afrikaans, but We ended up doing this across these countries as well, because when you work with creators, and when you're working with them to create content on their distribution platforms, you don't really need to know the language. You just need to, I mean, of course you do, but you need to. So we had local partners in all these countries, but we didn't really need an office. We could operate all of this out of Bombay, and we traveled obviously for some of these shoots and meetings and things like that. But that was about it. And then slowly but very steadily, Bacardi also realized this relationship is working for them. They saw positive impact in their sales numbers, in their brand uplift. So we started doing this for more portfolio brands like Breezer, and we created a property called Breezer Vivid Shuffle.
So this is a very interesting part. Never have I heard someone claim, and I'm sure there's like plenty of evidence of having market-based implications of a certain marketing activity at this scale, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, like again, having the
But
generic.
it's out there for people to see. I don't even need to claim it, right? Like it's there. Like I didn't even need to do anything to say, hey, look what we did. It's now proof of concept, a proof of work. There's proof of concept. We had but proof of work is when it's out there for people.
Absolutely.
Like when I walk into last year it was one of my really close friends' wedding, and they had a band come and play. And one of the songs they played was Ud Gaya, and I was like, I felt like crying. I was like, man, a few years back,
Impact, right? It's all about impact at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I felt super emotional. I was like, we sat in one tiny little room figuring out, hey, is this the song? Is this another song? Is this the right artist? How do we make this music video? All of that happened, but today it's a part of culture, right? And that's when I kind of also realized over time that there is a difference between art and design, okay? And I'll get into that a little bit later. But
so no, I specifically want to talk about that because one of the major things that's happening right now, I feel, since beginning of time, right? Obviously, like you mentioned, there's pop culture, there's great art, and there's always good substance that, as let's say video in this case, right? Video, like you mentioned, tourists or whatever, right? They may be the right product for the time in terms of consumption of an audience. But I feel what people are focusing less and less on, like, is it having an actual translation into numbers, or like how they say that marketing and sales are two entirely different functions. Absolutely. But I think this was one of the biggest IPs to come out of India that has actually had some impact and some translation into numbers for a scale like Bacardi's. And it's mad how it stemmed out of pop culture, because again, when we look at our population of like growing from 1 billion at that time to 1.4, 1.5, whatever it is right now, right? I would say it is fairly easier to understand what a niche does, but to take that same substance and spread it across a massier audience is a challenge. So to identify, like, let's say if it was any other person, or like, or just someone who had a lesser understanding, or to bifurcate between the mass and the niche, right? A Bacardi house party as an IP would be purely English, right? But I think that is the hot sauce you all had, where you all understood.
So, thank you for bringing that up. And you said numbers. One of the things that actually contributed to this success was not because we just happened to get lucky. And I'm a big data nerd. I'm a nerd. Okay, I geek out on Excel sheets. Like, my day-to-day job involves me to look at a lot of Excel sheets. But that is important because numbers don't lie, right? And you can make projections, you can make analyses, you can make assumptions that are backed by like data. And that's a lot of work that we did back then, is really scoured all these data points that we had. And your point from taking something.
Sorry, that is something you get from OML, or that's something personal?
It is. No, I mean, of course, I am also, I don't know if you remember, but I was a nerd back in school.
No, of course.
Right. So I still am. I think I'm still the same guy, and I love numbers, and I love understanding how they work at scale. But with even Bacardi House Party sessions, I think we used so much data, and that really helped identify the right levers to push to make it successful. And to your point, right, between something that's niche and something that's massy, I feel like that is a wrong classification only. Because I feel like, why is something niche, or why should anything be massy? When you can create something that blurs that boundary, that can, really cut across from the purist to the tourist. Virgil Abloh says this, and I really like that. He says, when you create something, make sure that it's for the purist also, but for the tourist also. right? Where both factions can really enjoy something. That's when you know you've created something of value. Of course, you can create something for purists and they might value it, and you might create something for tourists and they might value. But when you can create something that sort of works across that spectrum, is when it's really, it can impact at scale.
But the challenge
Yeah.
is, I feel like the challenge in this case is identifying what is that product which will, right? Because it's so easy to it's risk
Yeah.
using art as a tool to market,
No, that's
especially art that's more I
Yeah.
would say again inclined towards pop culture in your case, right?
Yeah.
It would have been a risk, I'm sure.
It was a calculated, yes, it's a risk.
Yeah, so
but
I
it's a
want to know
calculated.
how it was a calculated risk.
Yeah,
like-
so right. So I think there's a great question, by the way. I think art and I'll come to now where I was saying art and design.
Yeah.
So art without design doesn't work. I can be a self-proclaimed artist, take a piece of canvas, create something and proclaim this is the best painting in the world, right? But unless there is enough validation from people around me who agree that this is a great painting, there is no painting. And another thing that I really try and implement every day in my life with the same philosophy analogy of art and design is, take something as stupid as a doorknob, right? You don't know that what the doorknob's design is or how it's working until it breaks, right? So art doesn't need to work. Like the Mona Lisa stands there, and people go and appreciate its beauty and it blah blah blah. But when a doorknob breaks is when you realize, damn, this thing is broken. But all these years when you were using it, did you know what design went into it? No. I think that is amazing. Why? Because design has to be ubiquitous. It has to be around you in a way where it's not in your face, but you're using it so flawlessly that you don't realize its existence until it's broken. With that same analogy, when you take a piece of content, right, you could make the best piece of content in the world with the best cameras, with the best equipment, but if you don't have the right distribution, if you don't build the right audience for it, it's worthless, right? It could be your baby, sure, but beyond you, nobody will care, or why should anybody care? So similarly with content, taking that same analogy, you can make an Udgay, but you need to have an AIB. You need to run the numbers on an AIB to know, hey, because Bacardi is sponsoring it, is AIB's audience got an overlap with a potential Bacardi buyer that will result in a certain outcome. So when you come up with this property, you first define the outcome. What does success look like?
So you had the entire math mapped
Absolutely,
out.
absolutely. At every step of the funnel, right? So, how is it going to get distributed? How is it going to get amplified? And these are basic terms that we speak now.
I think these are also the points where the strong experience and strong background of companies count, right?
Absolutely.
Like there are, I'm sure at that point there must have been boutique agencies having the best art ideas and having the best things.
But they don't work.
The strong background in distribution, having the existing system of the network of creators that you all had sort of mastered the funnel, and you all knew if there's a piece of art that I'm distributing through this funnel, what is the metrics it's going to achieve.
Absolutely. And I think,
and this is something, by the way, like obviously again this is something that goes on in the background, but since you mentioned, it's getting me to think a lot where, okay, so I really wanted to clap at that last statement you made about the art and design. No exaggeration. It gets you thinking, right?
Correct. So, and on that art and design, I'll give you another example. It's like when you put on YouTube and you see Joe Rogan's podcast, your immediate, no matter what you like, at least for me, it's like I'm going to just watch it. It's become ubiquitous for me, right? I don't need to put in effort to consume his content. And I'm using podcast as an example because we're on one, and I hope someday, very soon, you can get there, right?
Thank you
right?
so much.
Where there is no effort in watching something, because it kind of cuts through. It works for itself. It's like a doorknob works every time you use it. But so. So it's just that, like, how do you become so entrenched in people's lives that you become a part of their life without effort, right? And I think that's what, even today we try to do, and a lot of things that I do today is, how do we make it doesn't always have to scream out, but when you're screaming out, ensure that it stays around in a way where people adopt it nicely. When they use it every day, that's when your work is validated. That's when the work you put in is done, right? So Bacardi house party sessions happened, and we spread across like the Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia. I've worked in about 17 countries with that brand. I've traveled a lot with working with them, kind of implementing this similar model of content marketing across different geographies. And that really, those 4 years that I worked with Bacardi, I was at OML for about 5 years, and with 4 years that I worked with Bacardi, I think it was a great experience. I really cherish it because I have friends now in all parts of the world. I've worked with some of the biggest creators and celebrities and influencers or whatever, and in Russia, Poland, South Africa, Kenya, China, like a bunch of these countries, Israel, UAE, and kind of I've met a lot of these people, worked with them, and then seen on the other end what impact is my work bringing, right? What impact is this? We did a music video, okay, great, sounds cool, but does it move product? Does it uplift brand? Does it achieve a certain objective? Yes. So that's when very quickly we started realizing, how do we optimize for these different objectives that we're trying to fulfill? How do we keep upgrading success metrics for a brand?
So talking about this specific part, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I understand was, again, your approach was more towards optimizing the product for the brand. But let's say when there were creators who you all represented, whose best interests were again in your hand, right?
Absolutely.
As an artist, I would want a certain piece to be projection of who I am, my identity, what my consumers want. But in a lot of the brand case, there might be issues where an audience of an artist is something versus what the brand's audience may be something else. If it
But
somehow,
that's where data helps you.
okay,
That's what I
like
would
finding
never.
the intersection.
Yeah, and then it's doable, right? I can tell how much percent of my audiences are overlap with a certain creator.
Like through backend
Through
tools
data,
or like,
yeah, just through data. Like, it's just understanding, hey, this is the target group that this creator has, and this is the bifurcation of the age, geography, etc., etc. Am I dealing with a similar audience? What is the overlap of that percentage? And then I benchmark that number. Then I calculate an ROI based on what I'm spending, not just on paying the creator, but also on creating the content, also on distributing it, etc., etc. So you kind of come to a ROI number, and now I work at a brand, and we have a term called CAC, which is customer acquisition cost, which is like our North Star metric. But there are lots of ways and a lot of math that you can do to understand whether it's going to work or not. And to that question when,
sorry, but in terms of like again, getting a customer acquisition cost for a product that's out there which has a functionality for someone's day-to-day life.
Yeah.
I feel there is obviously like a whole ecosystem of performance marketing metrics
absolutely.
that's present, right?
Yeah.
Like ads and everything else that's there.
Yeah.
But purely in terms of like content, right? Distribution of it would have been through partner channels or through channels they may not have given you access. Like again, from
when I was at OML, yes, yeah. So actually, that's why I also kind of,
to simplify for whomever is watching, didn't want to
Yeah.
get a lot into detail, but to
Yeah.
simplify it, basically when you are working from a production standpoint and giving your piece of product to someone else to distribute and just relying on numbers which are again more, I would say,
Superficial,
not superficial but generalized.
Yeah, generalized,
And like arriving at an average which you used to arrive at another average.
Yeah.
That's the challenging part, right?
Yeah.
Again, with the whole ad marketing ecosystem we have right now.
Yeah.
Across platforms, Google AdWords, Facebook Ads Manager, and all of those things, right? There's proper numbers that we're getting. So I would say it's easier to gauge there.
Correct.
How I can convert my, how can I generate a lead for an ad versus convert that certain lead to an audience.
Right.
But back then, purely like as a content piece, how did you arrive at the right metrics?
So your question was, how do we take a piece of content and how do we justify it without actually putting it on performance channels?
Having hard evidence of numbers.
Correct. I think there are so I think the first thing you identify is what is the objective of this, right? If the objective is to run sales numbers, right, sell product, it's not the right thing to do. I wouldn't recommend it, right? But if the agenda is to build brand and to build a presence and to build awareness, that's usually what we would focus on with these kind of things, right? And for that, there are multiple benchmarks that we would set, right? Engagement being one of those. And then within engagement, we would break it down very granularly, right? So we would say, okay, you can like a piece of content, you can comment on a piece of content, you can share a piece of content. Each of these actions have different weightages. right? Because if I am liking it, okay, I'm passive or sort of actively but engaging with this piece of content. If I'm commenting it, I'm going a little deeper, okay, I'm invested. If I'm sharing it, I'm literally advocating it to somebody else.
Okay.
And so we would, sort of optimize for a lot of these different metrics and things like that. So
So you're taking like a standardized process and adding your own
yeah,
variables to it.
absolutely, yeah. And it really helped because we would start optimizing for that. A lot of content we would make would end up being more shareable, right? And that helped the brand. It helped the purpose of what the brand stood for, and helped why we were doing what we're doing.
But
So
there's so many platforms and so many mediums to pull data from.
yeah.
So that's that must have been maddening.
Oh yeah, we had a whole team of like data analysts who were there.
Okay.
Great people. Some are from
Okay.
IIT, some of them great friends now as well. So all of these guys, yeah, their day to day was to like run numbers. That's what they would
They
do.
get very
And
less credit in general.
they get absolutely, they do not get the credit they deserve. I think a lot, because here's the deal, a lot of decisions that I make is based on data. That data is not coming from nowhere. It's coming from a very, very smart person sitting with smart modeling and tools and numbers that they've run. And this data gives us insights. This insight helps us make decisions that are more focused towards what we want to do with less ambiguity, right? So yeah, I think that's how we kind of went about it.
One of the things I see very common in our country is people rely heavily on brand deals. Just how musicians relied on touring,
Yeah.
which is not the case anymore because independent artists are making so much money on royalties.
Correct.
And there's proper there's an entire ecosystem
yeah.
for them to monetize their content just through distribution. What should creators do differently right now, and what would you do differently if you had were a creator and didn't want to rely on just like brands?
I wouldn't be a creator today. For starters, right? No, I'm kidding. I think but it's very hard to be a creator in today's day and age. And I think you summed it up pretty well because it was a different thing being a creator 5 years ago, and it's very different now. And I'm sure it's going to be very different 5 years from now. My assumption, and actually I'm pretty sure, my prediction is that in 5 years' time, everyone will be a creator, right, in their own capacity. It's going to be very normal to who is a creator who makes content. Today the tools to make content are so simple, easy and accessible, that anyone and everyone can make it. 5-year-olds are making reels, 7-year-olds have their own YouTube channel.
Yeah, the most viewed YouTube video ever is like a toy unboxing
There
thing
you go.
apparently.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's true. So I think anyone with a phone, and everyone has a phone, can be a creator, and the barrier of entry to distribute is also low, right? Because then you can just put it out on 15 different distribution network channel platforms if you wanted to, and so everyone is a creator, right? But if now to your question, if as a creator I want to professionally be a creator, what would I do differently? I would recognize a niche, right? And I feel like that is the only differentiator, because again, creating good content's definition has become very vague. Yeah, what is good
Very,
content?
very
Right.
more focused on validation and
Yeah. So I think
anything else.
anyone can make good content if they want to. You need to have a decent editing tool, you need to have a good camera, and good content ban jata hai. But not everyone has a definitive niche that can first get you this initial traction of audience, b put in this work continuously. And I think, you've spoken to a bunch of creators in the past, you would know this, but you need to be super consistent, right, in your niche. And then you need to build a community first, right? You need to first find those first 10,000 people who really like what you're doing. And I'll give you a very little, maybe not off topic, but I'll give you an example. In one of my projects at OML with the Bacardi group, I was in the Philippines, in Manila, and I met this creator who used to make very interesting guy. He used to make spoof videos, music videos. So he would take like really popular song, he would take a Justin Bieber song and make a spoof on it, and they were very popular, right? But he shuffled between Canada and Philippines, and he said, I run a different business in Canada. I was like, okay, what do you do in Canada? He's like, I'm a content creator. I said, why do you need to be in Canada to do that? He's like, you want to know what my channel is? I said, no. He's like, do you know what my channel is? I said, no. And he opened his phone and he showed me, it's called Ants of Canada.
Sorry?
Ants
of Canada. Okay.
I'm like, okay. It was a channel back then. This was about 4 years ago, that had millions of subscribers, not just views, subscribers. And this guy used to make content around ants.
Oh my god.
He used to farm ants in his house, okay, and it's a thing. People farm ants, like people have pets, people have ant colonies, and he would like build these, terrarium kind of things, and he would shoot that and make content around it and tell people how to farm ants and what is goes into it and why is he doing it. Millions of views. You know why I respect that guy? Because he found a niche, he found a community, and he's now monetized it. He's probably a millionaire selling ant farming equipment and merchandise and things like that. And there's this huge community of people who are actually doing it, buying it, and he's built this whole ecosystem around himself. It took him a long time, it took him a lot of work, and it took him finding a niche and building a community. And I think these three are probably the pillars that any content creator should rely on. And here's the other deal, right? Like lowest hanging fruit in India, but look at Tanmay. Right, he's built this whole empire of his. But one thing that you would notice upfront is his consistency. He does not fail to post a video. He posts a video every other day. Right, he understands that he runs it like a business. He runs it like a startup. In a startup, you have to show up every day no matter what to your customers. He looks at his audience like his customers. He breaks it down, looks at what interest areas do they like, what are they watching, what are they, what is trending right now within them, how do I be a part of that pop culture, how do I become a meme, how do I get shared, what does my audience want, how do I cater to them, how do I monetize them, how do I get super chat going and go crazy, how do I build a community called bot army that becomes like my cheerleaders in everything that I do. And he's done it so beautifully. He's looked at his channel, or his, not even his channel, like his entire um, creator career as a startup. Right, he's broken it down as how a startup would in different verticals. Everything from building community, testing his product, putting it out consistently, getting feedback, building a massive community, monetizing that community, and so I think it's like, how do you take those values of a startup and put that into the work you're doing as a content creator? That's what will make anyone success. And that's what I would do had I to become a creator. First things first, I would say is that, boss, for a year I'm not going to make any money. I would be aware of that fact, or at least, because I know that it takes that long to achieve, especially in today's day and age when everyone's a creator, to find that niche, find that community, build it, understand your audience, get feedback, be obsessed about what they want, deliver, and then go to the point of monetization, right? So सबको ऐसा लगता है कि if I get a few thousand followers, some brands will come to me, pay me money, and I'll become that's not how it works, right? I think that's the biggest problem today, is that people feel that it's easy, but it's actually not, and there's a lot of effort that goes into it, right? So
three parts to this. One being, you obviously are making me realize and remember how important data is. I think even if at face value your piece of content, your piece of art, or your piece of design is the best, if you're not really supporting it with numbers and trying to move forward, understanding your audience, it's not going to succeed, or the possibility of failure is higher.
Yeah, I think even before understanding, how do you build your audience?
Exactly.
Right, and that's where data helps you to know what are people watching. I can make whatever I want to make. I can make content around ants. But that guy knew people want, there is no content around ants. There is a big market for it. He probably tested that market, right? And
but again, you're talking from a very business standpoint. One of the things I fail to realize is, how do you find that fine line between staying true to yourself in terms of content, art, and again at the same time understanding your audience and feeding them what they want. Because let's say you're consistently putting out something for years, and you've sort of reached this audience, that might not be a fit. Like I'll give you the example of mine, right? Like my content, I've been putting only a few videos out. I think 5 or 6 videos out. With this, that'll be a total of 10 videos I'll be out. One thing people ask me is, why don't you put shorter clips and try to engage audiences? My most common answer is, I don't want for it to be present and accessible for everyone, because I know what my strongest audiences are, the ones who are willing to listen to a podcast for longer than an hour, right? That's the right audience I want to tap into. Now, what I've noticed a lot of times, when there is an easier avenue to build that number that you just mentioned about, people are constantly using these marketing tools to, again, just generate numbers, and at some point their content starts getting affected because they're like, okay, this is what my audience wants. So that's where
Yeah.
I feel people don't stay true to yourself. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this, right? One is the art. In your case, is finding this depth in conversation that you want people to take away from this,
Yes.
correct? But the other is, they are your audience at the end of the day, and your piece of content is the product that you are providing them, correct? It is what they're spending an hour of their day, of their waking day, watching this, right? And I think there is a lot of effort from their end as well in terms of consuming this content. I think there is some merit in respecting that and understanding, okay, how do I make this better? How do I make this a little easier? How do I make this a little more accessible? Maybe you don't want to do YouTube shorts, fine, but how do I make this slightly more accessible? How do I make this, you know, maybe refer it to another friend who probably is interested in the kind of conversations that we're having but doesn't want to spend an hour, which is okay.
Okay.
Right? And I think, if you treat your audience as customers, right, and you speak to them, you ask them, hey, do you like my content? And you get feedback, and I'm sure you do this, but that's when you start realizing, I think being customer centric is very important. And that does not mean you're not true to yourself. Right now, I'll give you an example of FamPay. I work at a fintech company where a neobank for teenagers, we're a payments app, right? But we are so customer obsessed. We continuously try to understand what is it that they want, what is it that we can do differently, and every day we learn something new. Every day, and obviously you can't solve for everything, but we understand, because at the end of the day, if there's millions of people using a product or viewing your content for that matter, you want to give them what they want because they have chosen to, you're at their mercy, they're not at yours. Right? Okay. They could unsubscribe or stop using a product or not buy a certain thing if they wish to, but you need them more than anything else. And I feel like, of course, always stay true to your product, but maybe work with your audience to enrich it, develop it. And usually I have this sort of way of working where I at one point have become self-aware, especially when you're marketing, right, a brand, that you lose objectivity beyond a point, right? Like, because you're doing this day in and day out, at some point you realize that, oh, there's a bubble around me. What I feel is right, what I think, my opinions start bleeding into. That's when I'm like, okay, stop, let's get validation from users. That's the only way we're going to go ahead with something where we're not sure about. And I think that has helped us immensely become really good at what we do. And it's not because we're great, but it's just because we're good at listening. We're just good at listening, and we're good at taking what we're listening and using that as learnings and insights and building, for that audience. So yeah, I think that's essentially what it is.
That's pretty fair. It's a different perspective than what I generally thought of. You're right, you're absolutely right. But like I mentioned, it's just like a mental battle between.
You want to protect your baby, right?
Yeah, I want to protect my creativity and be true to myself at the same time. So it's always like a tiff going on in my mind, whether if I'm okay, I am a marketing person. I understand. I for a living propose to my clients what they should be doing to push their product. But at the same time, if I am to do this for my own product, I don't know, right? So it's like a very...
Yeah, I think asking your, as like very basic example, there's some chocolates lying here. You pick a chocolate up, you eat it, and I'm like, oh, this tastes crap. And you give feedback to the company. And if there's enough people saying that this tastes like crap, the company has to make it better, right? And that's how it works. I think that's exactly, or like, for example, now they have like Coke and like really.
So it's like, it's counterproductive to keep making candy that tastes bad.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, but because you think it tastes good, I make this candy. Mereko lagta hai this is amazing candy. But if there's like 1,000 people eating it and 800 of them are telling me that this is crap, you need to do it better, I will have to make it better.
It's very good that we reached this point in conversation, because times are changing so rapidly. It is so difficult to define what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, or I think it was Bloomberg or one of these Wall Street journals or something, I read about how this brand that's been in the business for over 100 years, but they've been able to like generate millions in revenue only the last two, because apparently array of Gen Z influencers on TikTok in the US have discovered them and has started integrating into their styles.
Wow.
So now 100 years of presence,
Yeah.
and they've now broken their ground, right? And
Yeah.
the founders probably not even with them
Sure.
anymore.
Yeah.
So in times like these, when there's literally like something that, again, it boils down to the same thing, right? If, like you just said, that there have been times where you know what's right, but eventually, because you're trying to sell a product, you go and rely on numbers, you rely on
Yep.
audience. But as a creative person or as a
Yeah.
marketing person, are you doing justice to yourself? That's the biggest.
That's a that's a
that's like
great
the biggest problem in my
yeah.
mind that I think about.
Yeah, I think that's this great debate that's always there,
Yeah.
and I call it intuition versus data.
Okay.
Okay, so I can feel something. ये चलने वाला है. This is gonna work. I feel, oh, this is the, like a lot of filmmakers feel like that. Oh, this is the way this character is going. This is how it's gonna work. But then there's this analytical side of me that's like, 1 second, who is this? Who am I making this for? Like, what is this? What is the final outcome of this? And then I'm like, is there a way to pre-validate it to know whether it's going to work or not by using data, and not make something that might not work? And so you always try to find a balance. I feel it's never one or the other. Usually, as a marketer today, every day we speak to millions of users, and it's a little bit of a responsibility, right? Because you can't be frivolous. So and you're also representing a brand, but you're also talking to the Gen Z. So there is some level of intuition that guides what you're doing, but there's also this bedrock of data that validates what you're doing, and it kind of feeds into each other. Because as you keep going on, right, your intuitions, what is intuition? Intuition is essentially, you telling yourself that something is good, but it's actually based on previous experiences of having done something. And every time something is successful, it triggers, okay, this is good, this thing worked. And every time you start being intuitive, it's actually your brain kind of telling you, this is going to work because it's kind of worked in the past, but it's an iteration and this might work, and this, so it kind of feeds into each other. And I feel like that's how I've grown to or rather learn to
Have a balance.
yeah, like, find that middle ground and let my intuition be fed by data, which in turn is fed by intuition, and kind of keeps the ball rolling, right?
I think that's what I need to do too, because I have I'm constantly being pulled to either sides, and I have phases in like a process of working with a client where there are times when I rely on intuition to know what's right for them, but at the same time then there's data supporting otherwise. But that intuition also a few months down the line I know is going to generate data. So it's like a constant pull. I think I need to find balance, and hopefully I can.
I think the trick is enough data out there, and the thing is you can represent data how you want it to. So you can have an intuition.
Oh my god, this just makes me go crazy. I can't tell you. This actually makes me go crazy. There's no right and wrong. Technically, there's no right and wrong. What floats your boat is what is right, technically.
So if it works, it's right. If it doesn't work, it's wrong. It's
coming to the second part of creators, what I mentioned, right? I feel one of the main thing, either you're a digital creator, which is an influencer as they call it, if you're a musician or anything of those sorts. I feel ownership has become a very important subject, because there are these bigger corporations who've over the last 50 years or even 100 years have explored the mechanics, the math behind how to generate revenue using an IP or using a product that a certain artist has created, right? And they are always willing to back it with heavy money. So as an individual, you are always, when you see those numbers, when you have a financial offer in front of you for your product, you're ready to give it out like outright. I mean, let's talk about musicians, for example. There's this one common practice happening where either a record label or a certain company is coming offering you a few lakhs for your piece of music. You're ready to sell it, and then they are supporting it with distribution, marketing, and in the process, obviously, you make a name.
Yeah.
You end up using tours or that name that you've made to
Correct.
market yourself, which is again, I feel very short-lived. But what they're not realizing is that your piece of art, if distributed correctly, is going to generate revenue in perpetuity,
Yeah.
right? So there's this barrier again from a short-term gain to a long-term gain.
Yeah.
And I feel not many people have patience. Again, it's a different thing for musicians, for creators.
Money is a great motivator.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I don't know, like if I have to encourage a certain creator
Yeah.
to just be patient and to, of course, there's data, there's evidence. But that again, if I'm selling a product to someone who has the capacity to market
Yeah.
the same thing with a lot of resources versus me individually marketing it,
Yeah.
there have been cases where art itself, because it having very high intrinsic value, has grown.
Right.
But it's a risk.
Yeah.
Do you
Absolutely,
think
yeah.
that risk is worth it for these creators to own and let it just grow?
I think it largely depends on the creator, and here's my take on it. Okay, forget creator. I'm gonna use the term artist.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Look, just I'll tell you why. Because when you're an artist, you create art in whatever form. You could paint, you could put on a T-shirt, you could make music, you could make films, you could make whatever. But if you are not able to sell your art, you're not a showman, right? And if you're not a showman, if you're just an artist, and you think you're as an artist, your core is just making art, you need a separate machinery to push you out there. And that's when I think these corporates or big companies or record labels, they're not doing something that's wrong. They're not forcing someone to, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and people who realize that it's not in my capacity to reach 10 million people tomorrow, or even for that matter, invest this money that is required to reach these many people. They need this machinery to back them up because their core competency is just making art, right? And if the artist is self-aware that, hey, this is what I want to do is just make art, right? It's okay if I make a little less money now or even later, but I want to make a name doing what I'm doing, then I think it makes a lot of sense to go and work with a machinery that can make it happen. But on the other hand, there are artists who can sell themselves, who know that not just artists, there are people who can go out, scream to the world and show them their art and tell them, look, listen to my music, look at my painting, look at my t-shirt, look at my clothes, look at my whatever, right? Look at my video, look at my movie, look at my show. These are people who put themselves out there, become super advocates of their own work, and they're beyond artists then. They're showmen. They're people that like show people. They're people who can go out and really put their work out there, right? Those are the people who I feel, and these people are very self-aware. They know this, right? And you and I know a lot of these people in common also. So they people who are artists but can also go out and sell their art, find an audience to pay them for it. They don't need no corporates. They don't need no record labels. They can do this on their own. And a lot of them have been very successful doing so, right? Then whatever machinery you have, whoever it may be a corporate, it may be a really boutique agency, whatever it is just amplifying what that artist is doing, right? If that artist has that in them to do it, like not just make the art, but ensure that the art goes out to enough people and talk about it, or just put it out there in different ways, distribute it in different ways, or just be this advocate of your art, then you don't need that machinery. But if you're an artist, if you're a purist, if you're someone who's just very dedicated into the art part of it, but you might still be brilliant, you might still be the best record like music producer out there in the world, but if you don't know how to put your stuff out there, go out and get help, like as in get someone who can help you put it out there and do it. But the point is to move on.
That's why I think a lot of the artists and scientists in the world, their work was discovered after
Much
their
later.
death.
Yeah.
Much later.
Yeah, like Van Gogh died like right outside of right after he got out of a mental asylum at a really young age. But the Starry Night is probably one of the most recognized paintings in the world. He never had a representation. He never had all of, but he was a genius. You know that he was an artist that is spoken about hundreds of years after he
So
died.
to really derive the value out of your art, you have to have the self-realization to either know if you're a showman or you need a machinery,
Absolutely.
or work towards like being a showman.
Becoming
so
a showman,
that,
but then you
yeah.
need patience, right? So everyone's not a born showman. Not everyone can go and put themselves out there. They can. Not everyone can put their art out there. Not everyone is capable of it. Can they get there? Absolutely. Does it take time? Yes. Do you have the patience? I don't know. So that's something that a self-aware artist should answer. Is, hey, if I don't want to go through this route, the other option is to put in a lot of effort, time, change myself, and the way I put myself out there and make it happen. That's amazing, right?
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned now you're working full time with FamPay, a company that's raised $42 million in the last round of funding, initially being funded by Y Combinator. I saw that on Crunchbase link that the LinkedIn page had.
Yeah.
Flying on social media, the talk of the Gen Z audience on the internet, and having a very active Discord server as well. I know in a nutshell what the company's been up to. Obviously want to get more into what your function with them is, but I want to first understand how did this transition from entertainment and arts happen to fintech, which is one of the most lucrative industries right now, but from a personal level,
Yeah.
how did it really happen and why?
Right. So I think at OML I'd spent 5 years. I'd worked with a lot of brands, ranging from the Bacardi group to Netflix, Tinder, Red Bull, Levi's, bunch of these different brands I'd worked with. What I started slowly understanding is while I was working with a lot of data, I was creating a lot of cool content, working with them on their marketing strategies at large and understanding what impact it can bring to them. At the end of the day, at an agency level, right, there's a glass ceiling to which you understand the business outcome of things, right? And I reached a point where I'm like, okay, I'm working with these guys on their marketing strategies. I'm creating all of this stuff around it, helping putting it out there, working the numbers, but I don't really get to be a part of the impact of it, right? And that really, like, there was this itch in me, when I decided that, okay, I really want to be a part of something that I can actually help build, make these decisions, grow it, be a part of something that is actually where I can really feel the impact, right? At an agency level, you can be a part of it, but you're never really driving those decisions, and you're never really creating that impact. There's a lot to learn there, but I kind of reached that point where I had not stopped learning, but I'm like, okay, now I need to switch up to really get that my learning curve to get exponential, right? I think that was one of the bigger triggers that got me thinking. And I happened to see, no, I knew about FamPay. They were a very small company at that point when I had just gotten a seed round from Y Combinator, and I knew about them. And they were, turns out they were looking for someone to sort of look at their marketing function. And they so happened to also, so I kind of reached out to them, and we also knew Tanmay, and so that connection came about. And Tanmay worked with, so I had also started working with them at that point of time, and then we kind of spoke, and I spoke to the founders, and I went in just as a conversation, exploratory, just to know. But to date, even today, my founders are 24-year-olds.
Wow, are you
Yes,
serious?
yes.
I had no idea
Okay,
about
so
this.
Kush and Samba were 24-year-olds, and when I spoke to them, they were still 23, or they had just turned 23, or they were 22, and then they were turning 23. So right, so I think I saw that they built something that really has impact. Right now, coming to what FamPay does, it is a payments app for teenagers. What happens in India is, under the age of 18, you don't get your own bank account. It's linked to your parents, and because it's linked to your parents' account, you don't get access to the money in the sense where you'll probably get a card, but you won't know what the balance is. You won't know how to save, or it's just there to use. Now the bigger problem that we're trying to solve is financial literacy, right? Because when you think about it, in India, till the point, at least for me, on a lot of my peers, till the point I was like 21, 22, maybe even 23 for that matter, I had no idea what to do with money. For me, it was just like, पैसा आया, खर्चा करो, कुछ बचा तो अच्छा है. Right? And savings was really like a very vague concept where your parents would tell you paise bachao and all of that, but it was never really structured, right? I never really had the independence to do it because till much later in life, until I started earning, I would go to my parents for money and they would give me money whenever I needed it. We never had a concept of pocket money as such for me or a lot of people growing up. And in most of India today, it doesn't exist. So how do you solve for this, right? So how about you build a product that gives money in the hands of these teens? Everybody has a phone, right? Today, 11, 12, 13-year-olds have phones. They know how to use it. And so they figured out a way to build this product, and obviously they got a lot of validation from Y Combinator. They raised a seed round, and when I spoke to them, the energy that they bring in, they're technically Gen Z, and they're building for the Gen Z, and they've built for the Gen Z, and it really excited me at the stage at which the company was. The founders, their enthusiasm, the what they've put into building it, and what their vision is for FamPay, it really inspired me. And I was 27 and that 27, 28 at that time, and 27 at the time, and it blew my mind. I said, they're 5 years younger than I am, and they're doing such amazing work, and really inspired me, right? And that other side of me really kicked in, where I was like, okay, I get to be part of building something, like really growing something, and seeing this value firsthand, and seeing the impact of your work happen on a daily basis, right? And that's till date, it's been a little over a year, and it still drives me every day. I get really excited when I see the numbers, when I see new users adopting it, when we speak to new users, thousands of new users coming in, we are seeing their life getting better. When random users message you saying, I love FamPay, it's made my life better, it's done this, you feel pride in the work that you do. And the last part, which kind of got me into moving, was the learning bit, where I think I was working a lot on the brand side of things, and I really wanted to see how the product side of things work. And this gave me this opportunity to sort of take that up. And today I don't just look at brand, but I also look at product and performance marketing. So it's the entire spectrum of marketing, as a vertical or as a function. So I look into it. So it's been a lot of learnings. I met some amazing people, some people who are far smarter than I am, and I'm very, very privileged and happy to be in their company, who I've learned so much from, right? From even just from building. I had no idea how apps are built. Obviously I had like this vague idea, but now I can tell you what goes into building an app. And coming to your question of that shift from entertainment to fintech, when you look at it from a very macro lens, forget something's called entertainment, forget something's called fintech, everything is art. Everything is art, right? It takes art and an artist to make a piece of music, or a film, or a piece of content. It takes a lot of art into building a product. And there's so many artists involved. Writing code is like writing poetry, man. Like, I had no idea. It's like literally writing.
I can see it in your face how excited you
Yeah,
are.
I really love it, because
part of
yeah, and I work with engineers on a daily basis. I work with product managers on a daily basis. They use with product designers, with brand designers, with content creators and things like that. And this entire spectrum, you realize that this is whole, like, when you look at an orchestra versus you look at a person with one mic, they're both making music, right? But there's 100 people over there. There's 4 people playing the cello. There's 14 people playing the violins. There's all of this symphony that comes together to produce this larger than life experience. And that a similar experience can be produced by one person as well. But here it's like this whole different machinery that runs at such a large scale that it's beautiful. It's kind of understanding how all of these functions work together, and how this everyone's an artist, in my opinion. That not just at FamPay, but a lot of product companies, right? Because it takes a lot of effort and knowledge and expertise and intuition and creativity in putting all of this together for it to work, and for it to work for millions of people. And I feel like my job as someone who's looking at marketing at this company, at that vertical, is to take this beautiful machinery and symphony of like different artists coming together that has built what we call a fintech product now, if we give it a name, and take it out to the users, you know. And how do we market it, how we take it to, how do we make it better for them, how does it reach more people, you know. And I love that part of it, because it requires me to understand the product and everything that goes into it, and then build for this audience that can consume it, and kind of you know, put it out to them, right? So I think, yeah, that's...
Yeah, I can totally agree with what you're saying, and I think one of the major parts must be, as an agency, you're always like, even though there are companies who are working very closely with brands, and they are like they're like the same team, and they support the whole function of a certain division. I feel I mean, I can understand when you say that you're part of an existing company where you have so many stakeholders involved, right? It's always going to make you appreciate different aspects of things, and not, let's say you're an agency or marketing agency. You just are you are in the process of marketing. You are in the process of understanding numbers. You're in the process of optimizing your strategy to help the analytics. You don't really are in a position where you consult to a product member saying, okay, this is how my marketing number has drawn a picture for the brand for me. This is probably how you can change your interface or change your product accordingly. So I think that also makes it, I would say, it makes it a lot more valuable for you to be present there. Like, I feel personally, going from an agency, going from understanding business side of things to a brand is a perfect route, because of what you just mentioned, right? Like, now you have, at not just at face value, not just as a report, you are present in the team where you're telling each stakeholder how a marketing function is going to help them improve in their
and vice versa, right? There's sometimes, a lot of times, the product function helps us,
absolutely,
right, or the engineering function helps us. And I had no clue. I would take so many things for granted, right? Like, I'll give you a basic example. Like, you put on your TV today and you open Netflix, and suddenly, boom, your favorite show is running on. Or you go to a, you know, like the local shop, and you buy whatever, you buy a bottle of water, you scan a code, and in a second and a half, payment is made. We take it for granted, you know. Arey, ho gaya na payment, okay, done, let's go. The amount of work that goes behind running a machinery that can make that possible is what I was telling you earlier, right? Like, good design and good products are ubiquitous. They don't feel like there is effort, right? And when you try to minimize this effort for a user, for anybody else, it's magic, right? It's like you want the least amount of friction for something to happen, so that they use a product again, and this is used every day, and you feel like you feel great because they're doing it over and over again. If there was friction, they would drop off. If, you know, if there was a problem, they would, if the doorknob would break, you know, that's when you know, oh shit, it's broken. But until then, you're there in a way where you're a part of their life. You know, I cannot live without this brand, so to say.
There's effort that's making things effortlessly. Effortless, yeah, right? I mean,
there's effort that makes a lot of things effortless, and I think that's what I really value, you know, with what I do today, because I've learned a tremendous lot, right? And I tell this to anybody who I speak to, is that you know, one thing is, oh, I'm in marketing, I'm in this, I'm in that, but kind of like working in a place where everybody is razor focused on doing a certain, you know, on achieving a larger goal, which has a tangible outcome, is a beautiful feeling, right? And yeah, and I've really learned to appreciate it. And constantly I'm learning every day. You know, and you mentioned a lot of people now reference our social media or our marketing game and say, oh, we want to be like them. That's great, but that's not why we started. We're literally doing this for our consumers. You know, we understand what they want, where their heads at, how can we be a part of their life without effort. And that's kind of what makes it, you know, it's not like achieving this. Of course, we have targets and stuff like that, but that's a function. That's a function of what you do, right? And I think what you do is very important.
Yeah, and honestly, the first time you told me about this role, I have seen the same excitement since the day one. I didn't take it seriously, honestly, because I didn't know what it was. Like, anytime you mentioned tech, anytime you mentioned finance, my educational background is in accounting and finance. So I know how from a face value, it can get a little tedious compared to art and creativity as a process
Yeah.
of as a job or like
Yeah.
as something to win your bread, right? So now that since like I told you, we've also been consulting a fintech startup, and now we're entering the space, learning about the
Yeah.
space,
Yeah.
learning about how funding works, learning about a lot of things that are involved in this process,
Yeah.
right? I can totally relate to the excitement, and
But I think
it just
take the analogy, right? Like if forget fintech, forget for a minute like it has anything to do with fintech, but you just look at it as a product, like you would as a piece of entertainment or a creator or an artist. Look at it like that. You know, it's just it's art. It's just, you know, you sell art, right? Like in the sense like you when you represent an artist or you go to a brand and you know you recommend someone to them, you're selling, you know, the artist or the art. Very similarly, I'm selling this beautiful piece of art, right? That's helping people's lives, and hopefully making money out of it, right?
absolutely, and the money aspect, right?
Yeah.
I was just watching this article. I was watching this video on Forbes' YouTube channel about how fintech has come from way behind and just surpassed medical sciences, has surpassed manufacturing, has surpassed investing also
Yeah.
in terms of the value that can be created financially. And some of the biggest unicorns across the globe are fintech startups. And it's crazy how the space works and how fast moving the space is, right?
Right.
A company that may raise a certain amount right now to
Yeah.
build may already have valuation of crores maybe in 3 months, and then they're doing another round. One of the biggest gap that I, again, someone new to the space, I'm seeing is the real on paper revenue. What's happening is a lot of the valuations are based on projections, which are
Yeah.
5 years, 10 years, even 20 years
Yeah.
down the line.
Yeah.
And there's these ridiculous amounts that, again, when I say ridiculous, I don't mean to undermine, but
Yeah.
they are way out of proportion as compared to what we generally see, right, for other business spaces.
Yeah.
And they are again backed by such heavy projections, but at some level there is possibility of losing like a business model. Let's talk about a specific app having a business model that is completely reliant on a certain let's say ads to generate revenue. The
It's called
ad the
Facebook.
yeah, okay. Let's take
Yeah.
Facebook as an example.
Yeah.
Actually, no, not Facebook as an example. More so, Facebook's business is you use the app, and in return we make money through ads. Yes,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
but when it's a financial platform, you are getting them to use it for again a function of day-to-day life, which has money itself, and they are trying to monetize it via ads. Let's say
Right.
they're monetizing via
That's
ads.
yeah, sure.
The minute that spectrum of thing, that part of the whole spectrum is sidelined,
Yeah.
how are these companies going to make money? Like again, everything
Yeah.
is based on projections. If I have certain users by this end, I generate this amount. Then before I hit those users, I'm raising more funds to generate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I think there's two separate things that
Hmm.
you asked, right? One is valuation,
Yeah.
and the other is monetization, right? And I think of course, they're linked.
I didn't know how to structure it
Yeah,
properly
yeah,
because
fair enough.
there's just too many variables.
Yeah, you know, I think like how we look at it is as valuation. I think valuation is a byproduct of you know, a lot of variables, but some of them that you know do shine out is the total addressable market. So when you look at, hey, you know, this product can go out to millions of people, the value that it can create is tremendous. You know, people, investors see value in it. But valuation is a number, very honestly. Of course, it's an important number from a business perspective. Consumer doesn't care, right? Why would a consumer care what valuation is who? Unless they're very curious about it, sure, they can find out. But from a now coming to a monetization perspective, I think when you build a great product that people use on a day to day, you will not want to let go of it, right? I'll give you an example. WhatsApp is free even today.
Yeah.
But if tomorrow WhatsApp came and said, we're going to charge you 100 rupees a month, you would not even blink an eye before
Obviously.
saying I'm going to pay for it, because you
Yeah.
use it every day. You use it, you know, like it's like a part of your life. You can't live without it today. So when you build great products, monetization comes very naturally. It's a question about how you go about it. So what you mentioned is is showing ads a way of monetizing? Maybe, right? Like Amazon does, the Prime Video does this, or Disney Hotstar does this. They will show you ads. They'll still give a freemium version of the product. But hey, if I want a better experience and I still want to use your app, I'm gonna or use your product, I'm gonna subscribe to it. I'm gonna pay for it, and I'm gonna maybe cut the ads out. Every business, startup, big corporation, or even every creator, every agency, anything that exists does so. If anyone's putting the time, effort, energy into it, they're doing it for a monetary outcome. Unless you're investing that in your family or yourself, everything else is usually done to get a monetary return on that investment. That's business, right? Like if you're not making money, if you're not projected to make money, that business is not probably right. So how will a lot of these fintechs make money? I think there are a lot of technical ways to make money. There is MDR, there is credit, there is interest, there is BNPL.
Credit is a term that literally everyone is talking about, how at some point they start with a certain function which they are based the whole model on, and they say at some point when we scoop off the credit which is only available for the banks at the moment for countries across most of the countries, when we start scooping a piece of that pie, that's when we're going to be profitable. But that's again an assumption, right?
Yeah, but it's a validated assumption because banks are these really, like for the Gen Z, and I'll tell you from my perspective, for the Gen Z, banks are like these giant places where it's very hard to get shit done. It's true. It's a perception, right?
Now I get it.
And how do you if you go to a 14-year-old and you tell them, oh, will you go to SBI to do something? About SBI? What? Like, I'll give you a simple perspective. My parents,
I get it.
My parents banked with an SBI or a centralized bank. Okay, our generation banks with
neobanks.
or even an HDFC or a ICI. Those are also going to get old, right? So like as most things, it's a cycle, right? And at every point in the cycle of that cycle, you need to innovate for the generation, and that's what fintechs of today are trying to do. That's what they're trying to sort of. Like I'll give you an example. Gen Z is like 16-year-olds. They get we give them something known as fam coins. These are like in-app currencies where every time you spend, you earn this in-app currency. You can spend it on offers, discounts on cool brands. A rewarding technique where if you ever use Cred or FamPay, every time you spend, you get fam coins. It's like an internal currency. You can use this currency to spin a wheel and get cash back, or avail discounts, offers on brands that they really like. And we know what brands are because we're building for them. But if they would do the same thing on an HDFC, they would get points to redeem on a suitcase. That they're never going to use in their life. Who wants a suitcase, man? Like what 15, 16? I don't want a suitcase from HDFC. I'm just saying, not HDFC, I'm just using it as an example, but any of these guys. So I think like what the new age fintechs are trying to do is really solve for and build for this generation that is far ahead of all of that. And I think that's where the right to win is, and that's what we call it.
So from what you just mentioned, I understand overall what businesses are maybe doing right now is have a certain model, move forward with it, seek validation through raising funds.
Not just raising funds. I feel like, valuation is one thing. The other is we have actual users.
I'm coming to that. Just like proving their model okay, we are into the business of providing value to a certain audience through finances. So we are building an audience in the process.
Right.
Now, them figuring out what are the other spaces which we can simplify or optimize, and those are the actual revenue streams.
Sure.
So first step is
it's always getting we spoke about if I were a creator, or the first
it boils down to the same thing.
Is build a community.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we're doing.
So that's the proof of concept that's going to serve for real revenue.
Absolutely. Unless you don't have a community, what are you going to monetize? How do I monetize? Right? Unless I don't have enough people who come and use my product.
It's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing. And that's when you're a creator, you need to think like a startup.
Yeah.
And that's essentially how it works.
That's madness.
You build the community, ensure that the community, you become ubiquitous, you become effortless for them. And when you reach that stage, you can monetize because they will pay for you. They will pay for that product. They will pay for that service. Right? There's no life without it. Like you can't. A certain function of your life becomes easier, and for that you put a value.
Absolutely.
right? Whether it is like today, for example, I'm a power user of Dunzo. Okay, right, or whatever, somebody uses Swiggy, Instamart, but a lot of people, instead of going out calling the kirana wala or going out and buying something, if I've run out of eggs, I'll call for eggs. I've run out of anything, I'll call for it, and it comes in 20 minutes. So I think like and I pay for it. I happily pay for it because I'm like, I am saving so much of my time, effort, energy that I'm putting into other things that actually, either build value for me or give me joy or give me peace, rather than going out and buying eggs. There's somebody who does this and gets paid for it. I'm happy to pay for it, and it's a beautiful ecosystem, right? So now, like I'm using Dunzo as an example, but because that brand and that service has become made my life effortless, and it's become effortless because
and now that's built a trust, you would rely on them.
Absolutely, yeah.
That I believe in for sure. Like the minute Swiggy is also like it's a Zomato versus Swiggy thing, right?
Yeah.
I personally, whatever product I use, I am I'm a big loyalist. So if I'm using a Swiggy for a certain function, I would never use Zomato for the same function. The minute Swiggy offers the same restaurant review function as Zomato does, I'm going to delete Zomato, right?
Really?
So I'm
a Zomato loyalist. I'm kidding.
Yeah, obviously they have many more like they have a larger model than Swiggy, I would say.
Right.
In a certain direction of like reviewing, like social media for restaurant business, for example.
Yeah.
So but the minute it comes to Swiggy, because they've built like more of an I would say loyalty in me, I would always prefer them. So I
usually go for the best offer because all of them discount, so it's great.
That I think you should use Dine Out for. There's always
Dine
like
Out, yeah,
there's always so many options.
Dine
Like
Out's
there's
great.
clutter of things, and one does something, there's always breaking down. Anyway, I think there's so much more we can talk about.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, we'll do another conversation sometime soon where we dig deeper into the fintech bit.
Yeah,
Now I
that'd be a lot
think
of
we've
fun.
reached a limit of having your time availability.
And the
we
cameras
need
are
to-
heating up
Yeah,
now.
and the cameras are heating up. We should cut it short.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, man.
Thanks, man. This was great. Right? Awesome.
Likewise.